already been learning a lot. I've already had to kind of mentally revise some of the things I have to say based on what I've learned so far. But let me jump into it pretending like some of the things I heard earlier don't apply. Though, what we've learned from Becca Levy's work is that people have these two different stereotypes of aging. One is a positive one, that with age comes wisdom, but there's also the other side of it. With age comes senility. And as with most complex questions, the answer is going to depend on many factors. I'm going to look at this from the perspective of how these two types of aging may relate to decision making, specifically economic decision making, and look at some real world measures of that. Okay, so I'm looking at this from a cognitive aging perspective. This is an important question because, as we know, there are a lot of old people. This has been referred to as the Gray Tsunami. They apparently hold a lot of the country's money and wealth. They spend a lot of money every year, something like $2 trillion. And they have a lot of extremely complex, extremely important decisions to make over their lifetime. I think this is the exact same stock image that at least I've seen once or twice already today. So it goes without saying to most of the people in this room that there is some bad news about aging. This is the part where I'm going to ignore what I learned earlier today. Our fluid cognitive abilities, our processing speed and efficiency, abstract reasoning, working memory, attention. Everything that we can think of as your brain's hardware, if you would use a computational metaphor. These are things which seem to slow down over age. I think that it's about the right time after lunch for a quick pop quiz, since all of you are digesting right now. So this is a very typical measure of fluid intelligence. It's Raven's progressive matrices, and the idea is that there's some pattern among these 8 objects which will allow you to fill in the last blank cell there from one of these 8 options. So this is one of the practice items from one of the items in our studies. And you've had about 10-15 seconds to think about this, so I'll just show you the answer. Turns out if you add up the rows or the columns, you're going to end up with something like that. Right? So option B there. Well, as it turns out, if you were relatively younger in this room, maybe you're a little faster at this. If you're a little older, maybe a little slower. So that's perhaps the bad news. The good news is, however, that as most of you know, there is this other form of intelligence which researchers call crystallized intelligence. This is more an accumulated body of knowledge, experience, expertise. It's what economists refer to as your intellectual capital. So, turns out, and you've seen these results over and over as well, you have increasing crystallized intelligence throughout your lifetime. I like to kind of think of this as the learning effect. We are learning throughout life, at least somewhere into your 60s. So, we have something that improves with age, something that decreases with age. Both of them seem like they might be important for decision making, so we thought about this, and with the help of many big shoulders to stand on, we came up with a fairly simplistic model. So rather than what most people in decision making or aging research do, which is to look at just the main effect of age, do people get better or worse, or do they change over age, let's in addition measure the underlying constructs of crystallized and fluid intelligence using very standard laboratory measures. And because both of those we think will mostly positively impact decision making, and one improves and one decreases, you might have different pathways to good decision making as people age. Now, if for a particular task, the fluid pathway is more important, for example, newer tasks or more complicated tasks, you might expect older people to get worse at the task, whereas if you have something where experience and knowledge matter a lot more, you might expect older people to actually get better. So, in an earlier paper, studying the foundations for this research, we looked at this in a number of different, what we call decision-making tricks. You can think of these as underlying building blocks of good decisions across many different real-world decisions. So something like, how patient are you in your intertemporal choices? So a little bit of background, these are choices between smaller amounts of money now and larger amounts of money later. They're consequential in the sense that we pay some of our participants for some of their choices. So For economists, that's called being incentive compatible. Gets people a little more interested in really trying to figure this out. So we also measure a number of underlying factors. So three measures of crystallized intelligence. So these are the vocabulary and general knowledge measures people usually use, and fluid intelligence measures like the one I showed you and many other standard ones. I should also note that all of our studies are done online, so even though we didn't have the good fortune of using things like Test My Brain, people are able to do these online even without as sophisticated techniques. Okay, so what we do find is that both crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence do positively relate to making more patient intertemporal choices. That is, the more you know, and the faster your brain works, both contribute to being more patient at these choices. And what's interesting is that they actually happen to perfectly balance each other out in our sample using this set of tests. I won't say that it's true more generally, but what you might infer from this, admittedly correlational result, is that perhaps there's some sort of compensatory process by which older adults, rather than being able to chug through these and figure out the implied internal rate of returns or interest rates, can have some more heuristic or experiential-based process by which they're able to make the more patient decisions. In all of our research, we're going to control for as many things as possible, demographics, SES, things like that. All right, so that's our earlier paper, but we wanted to look at something more real-world relevant. Right? It's nice to show that older people are actually more patient and that maybe they're solving these questions in a different way, but how does it really impact people's behaviors in the real world? So to do this, we're going to look at credit scores. So for those of you who don't know, credit scores are a measure of what we'll say cumulative financial performance over your lifetime. It's something you accrue by essentially borrowing money and then paying it back. So it's your credit worthiness. And good credit scores can lend extremely large benefits, ranging from getting lower rate loans, being able to get those loans at all, to even being able to get a job or apply for an apartment. People look into this in all sorts of places. So there are big financial benefits to having higher credit scores. Now, what's nice about it is it's also an objective measure. So it's not something that we have to worry about measuring in the lab. This is data that, if you get people to sign the right IRB forms, you can request. Right, so for this, we use a nationwide sample consisting of actually people from a market research panel, which we try to get a broad sample of, as well as people from the Columbia Virtual Lab. So wide age range, try to get it somewhat representative, but of course with online samples you're always going to have this selection issue, and we don't have the money to go install the internet in everyone's home that we want. But what we did was we collected a number of these web-based measures of fluid and crystallized intelligence. Now, one of our additional questions here was, in our earlier paper, we kind of didn't really understand how crystallized intelligence was helping people make these better financial decisions. In some sense, vocabulary should have nothing to do with whether you're more patient in life. So we also looked at more domain-specific expertise. In this case, we're looking at the financial domain and also health literacy. We also have a number of control variables, of course, demographics, risk and time preferences, what we've just been talking about, and also big 5 personality traits. And then we were able to obtain credit reports from a major credit reporting bureau with permission, of course, for the majority of a larger sample. So the 415 is the final sample. And I'll jump right to the results here. What we find is that there is this big positive effect of age on credit scores. Older people have higher credit scores. This is not just true in our data, it's true in pretty much any sample you look at. A big part of this, however, is just having a longer credit history. So I can talk more about that offline. So we also, of course, find the underlying changes in fluid intelligence dropping, and in this case, financial domain crystallized intelligence increasing. You also get the general crystallized intelligence increase. So more importantly, of course, these both positively relate to having good credit scores. And when you control for both of these things, again, you find this kind of compensatory effect. Now, again, credit scores are this long-term measure of decision-making competency. So what we can say is that something about how people are making these financial decisions over their lifetime seems to be changing. two different pathways can lead you to the same place. So let me skip this illustrative example. Basically, it's the saying that really these credit scores can make a big difference. We also control for a lot of different things which I won't have time to talk about. But I do want to tell you about two other decisions that we had all of our business make. So one is a credit card repayment task. In this task, people are given some lump sum of money and they're asked to pay down one of two credit cards. One of the credit cards has a higher APR, so if you want to do the best of the task, you want to pay off as much of the higher APR credit card as possible, but we set it up so that you kind of want to try to close out one of these accounts, and usually to close out the lower APR accounts. So it turns out that both financial literacy and fluid intelligence contribute to performing well at this task as well. You find a very similar pattern to what I showed you before. Slightly different domain. We look at being able to choose a good health insurance plan based on a health profile that we provide participants. So tell them how many times you're going to go to the doctor, and then basically it ends up being a math problem, right? But nonetheless, you find that both health literacy and fluid intelligence contribute to good decisions in this task, and that those two pathways, again, partially explain the underlying changes in the lifespan on doing well at this task. So to summarize, we have these two skills that increase and decrease in age, and they seem to provide different routes to good decision making. We've already seen some echoes of this throughout today. Some of it may not even necessarily be specific to this expertise measure or this domain-specific crystallized intelligence. Maybe it's something else as well related to more experiential or affective processing, as we heard a lot about in the first session. And it's not going to be due to differences, at least in our data, on SCS, your general knowledge, mere experience with financial products. You really need to have expertise and understanding of these financial instruments. And it provides some implications for policymakers. We know a lot about how older decision makers are really struggling with some of these newer domains, things like trying to teach your grandma what a Bitcoin is and why it's worth money. And this is not just about novel things, because it turns out a lot of retirement decisions are one-time decisions that you won't be able to develop experience with. And if you screw up, it's the rest of your life that you're suffering for. So we need to reduce the need for fluid processing by doing a lot of the things that choice architecture suggests is important for everyone, but should be especially important for older adults. So structuring and filtering the choice sets, providing good external aids, and setting good defaults. But at the same time, younger adults, as probably most of us here understand, also need help. Yeah, their brains are faster, they're better able to process new information, but they lack the expertise and knowledge to help with the other part of the good decision making. So as a closing thought, I'll read this quote from Charlie Munger. The other big secret is that we're good at lifelong learning. Warren Buffett is better in his 70s and 80s in many ways than he was when he was younger. If you keep learning all the time, you have a wonderful advantage. So, ending on a positive note, thank you to all my collaborators and to the NIA and National Endowment for Financial Education.